Welcome to Gov360. I'm Sam Toles.
I'm Mack.
Mike Paulhus.
Chris Mann.
Trying to do more with less.
Boy, I'm not really sure how to answer this one.
And what keeps me up at night, Sam, mostly is change in council dynamics.
I love that.
Yeah, it was devastating.
The council called an emergency meeting, went into executive session, came out and said, thank you for your time, you're done.
That just highlights the importance of the model of professional city management.
It's my life work to help fix the broken communication that we have in local government.
Today, we're flipping the mic. Sam Toles is in the host chair, and I'm joining the panel. And what you're about to hear is raw. The fears we hide, the hits we take, the moments that almost broke us. If you lead in local government, this one's going to stay with you.
Welcome to Gov360, your full circle view on local government. I'm Sam Toles, and I have the privilege of sitting in the host chair today, sharing the mic with Chris Mann and some of my favorite leaders in local government. What connects us? Well, social media brought this group together, and we're all very active on LinkedIn. In fact, we've all worked together. But this episode is not going to be about social media or the work that we've done together. I wanted to bring these leaders together to have a real conversation, because as I've traveled the country this year, I have found a lot of fascinating themes are emerging, that local leaders are sharing the same pain points with me. These people on this episode are all exceptional examples of leadership, and I want you to know that they share the same fears that you in the audience have as local leaders. Today, I wanted to have a conversation that's deep, that's honest, and, if my guests will allow me, often vulnerable. What really keeps local government leaders awake at night? So welcome Chris, Amanda, and Mike to Gov360. I'm going to kick it off to Chris because he's the full-time host, and then I'll let him round robin around the group. Chris, what's keeping you up at night? And let people know who you are and what this is all about.
Well, first of all, this is great. Thank you for hosting. I'm really enjoying being in the guest chair for a change. Very nice. So my name is Chris Mann. I'm the city manager in Wildomar, California, a city of almost 40,000 in Riverside County, Southwest Riverside County. I am approaching my 7th year as a city manager in total. This is my 3rd community managing in those 7 years. And what keeps me up at night, Sam, mostly is a change in council dynamics, primarily change in community dynamics. But as we all know, the most important factor in job security and job satisfactions for a city manager is the council that we work for. And I'm blessed to have a fantastic council. But I guess if anything keeps me up at night is what happens when that changes, because I've been on both sides of that, and those things that we can't control keep us up at night. And in my mind, the biggest thing is the council dynamic.
The winds of change. We're going to get into that. Amanda, come introduce yourself and tell us where you're coming from and what's keeping you up at night.
Well, hello there. I'm Amanda Mack. I'm the city administrator in Harrisburg, South Dakota. I'm coming into year lucky number 13 in city management, but almost a year here in Harrisburg. I've served a number of communities in South Dakota and Iowa. Oh gosh, what keeps me up at night? Well, besides being a woman in her mid-40s, and the need for a fan to be blowing on me at all times or I don't sleep, what I spend a lot of time thinking about is how people are receiving information and how much wrong information is out there. And sometimes it feels very daunting to try and figure out how to share real things that are happening in our community, and the the importance behind it or how those decisions get made. But we don't have unlimited time. And so, I spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the era of fragmented media, we've talked a lot about as a group individually. And really, there are a lot of loud voices. Each of you, I know, have experienced some of that pain point. We'll talk a little bit about that today as well. I think that keeps a lot of folks up at night, probably listening to podcasts like this to soothe them to bed. Michael, last but not least, tell us where you're coming from, about your role and what keeps you up at night.
Well, thanks, Sam. Mike Paulhus, town manager in Plainville, Connecticut. I'm in my 25 plus years in local government in my third community in Connecticut. And, it's just, I think the things that keep me up, one in particular, I think, is just trying to do more with less. In Connecticut, there's no county governments, and we're 169 towns all competing to, for our economic tax base and so forth. So trying to do more with less is sort of a mantra that, but it just doesn't work. It puts a burden on, trying to have to say no to so many different things, because otherwise you're just overloaded. And that's the sense and the feeling that I'm trying to avoid, in terms of trying to bite or take on too much in local government.
I love that. I think that resonates with everybody. All of the things, it's election day. Am I going to have a new board? Being in this world, it's been so wonderful. I've become kind of a therapist, a de facto therapist to a lot of folks. So that after election day this past November, my phone was ringing with board changes. And so, Chris, your point really resonates. Amanda, it's my mission, it's my life work to help fix the broken communication that we have in local government. And I know all of you, there's not there are a few local governments I know of, but not many where resources are impossibly constrained. Working with small teams, having huge ambitions and wanting to get things done is such a really meaningful part of our work. And it's really hard when we can't do that. So I think all of those are really good places to start this conversation. I want to begin because each of you has shared with me stories of, your own moment of our greatest fear, right? As a manager, as somebody, and I speak of this in my private sector career, I had risen the ranks and I was, pushing and pushing and pushing. And I never contemplated what it would be like to lose my job. And I lost my dream job. I was, laid off from Bleacher Report along with the entire C-suite back at the end of 2020. That's after tripling the audience. We had, we went from 30 million people to 108 million people, whereas our counterparts in the television side of the business had actually declined by double digits. And yet they were the ones who were rewarded, because that's politics. And sometimes the work, when we do a great job and we put our all in and we see our teams pushing and pushing and pushing, politics jump in a moment and change everything. So I wanted to first share that moment for me because it was devastating personally. But I look back and in the subsequent years, I never made more money. I had huge opportunities that came immediately following that termination. I learned a lot, and it brought me to this moment now leading CiviSocial, which is the greatest thing I think I've ever done personally for me. And I think for a lot of your fellow managers, for a lot of people in your seat, there's a tremendous fear about getting fired. Like, it just is all consuming. It's the thing that gets in the way of decision making. It gets in the way of, saying the hard truths like Amanda was just talking about. So I want to start with Mike on this because, Mike, you were an elected mayor and you got defeated. So in Connecticut, sometimes it's strong elected and you were the manager, but you were also the elected and you got defeated. Tell us what that was like, what you learned from that and how you deal with that fear of being fired.
Yeah, it was devastating. And full disclosure, I lost to a Green Party candidate, and that's pretty hard to do in a Democratic town. Yeah.
Oh, so congratulations. That's difficult to do.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I have that cross to bear, I guess. And but yeah, it was I had 3 terms, 2-year terms, so 6 years as the chief elected official, the first selectman in Connecticut for the town of Windham. I was the administrator first, and then opening came up, and I went for it because that's just how the structure is if you want to be the administrator. And so what I found so difficult was to try to marry the elected stuff with the day-to-day operation. So your town manager function and an elected official. And so there's this tug of war between, trying to get elected to do your job and then, doing your job, what you think is right for the community. And so that's where I think the real rub was. And for me, it was just trying to do the best. Politically, it wasn't always in my best interest. And so it's a really tough fine line to walk. And it just, that I think more than anything, maybe even be more than the trying to do more with less, is in that time frame. It was early on in my career when I started in Windham, and that's where I started. And that fact of trying to balance was weighed heavily, and it's really a tough thing to do, try to pull off.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, I think that just highlights the importance of the model of professional city management, right? And the council manager form of government, which, has become the most popular form of government in the country. Here in California, over 90% of the state's 483 cities implement the council manager form of government. But, to have that distinction and that division between the elected side, the political side, and the administrative side is important. It's fascinating to me, Mike, that you held both simultaneously, and that must have been incredibly challenging.
Yeah, right. Because you're on one hand, you're moving on a program and you're trying to benefit everyone, and then you've got to count votes, and you're right now I'm the manager and I leave all the politics to the council, right? But back in Windham, it was like, 1 minute I'm, trying to corral votes and count. The second I'm trying to think, well, wait a minute, how do I justify, how do I piece all this together, to make sense of it, and that was, there was a lot of horse trading and other things I didn't like because it kind of split my psyche in half, in terms of trying to champion for the community, but still have to have enough support to be able to re-elect it, to get to do the job that you want to do.
Yeah, I would imagine so often the things that you have to do to be an effective manager and an ethical manager are
Right.
things that may be contrary to the goal of getting reelected.
Exactly. Yeah. That was the rub. That was the balance in trying to make things work. It's really tough.
That's awesome. And Mike, did you have something now today as you look back on losing to the Green Party candidate? When you think about the pain in that experience, what did it teach you? How do you take that as a wound or a moment of reflection and take it into your work now? Does it make you more secure in your work? Does it make you feel less secure?
Yeah, I think it more secure because it's a lesson to say, listen, life wasn't over, and just picked up pieces and moved on. I ended up in North Branford, which was great, which was my second community. But I took away from that I learned a lot in terms of just trying to figure out what went wrong, and a lot of it for me was just communicating and the way I communicated, or really try to improve my communication. And that's the biggest lesson, biggest takeaway.
Huge, right? When that moment happens, I guess the thing to think about is, A, it's going to be okay. You're going to land on your feet and you're going to be stronger. But it is really important to have that moment of self-reflection. And so I love that, and now you've been featured on ICMA's magazine as, one of the great communicators of local government. So
It's still got a long way to go.
I think you do pretty good. Amanda, tell me about your, most painful moment, if you're open to sharing, like that moment where things went awry, and what did you take away? How did you deal with sort of that ultimate, personal devastation, if you will?
Boy, so my previous community, I was the first city manager. They had changed their form of government city manager form from a strong mayor. So it was the first manager that they'd ever hired. I was there for almost 4 years. And oh gosh, about this time last year, I gave my notice per my contract. I had been given an incredible opportunity here in Harrisburg, and it was just something that my family and I felt called to do. And 2 weeks after I gave my notice, the council called an emergency meeting, went into executive session for 3 hours, and came out and said, "Thank you for your time. You're done." Um, and I I don't want to say that I didn't see that coming necessarily, but I also was really I was shocked by it, and frankly really hurt by it. I didn't get to tell people goodbye. I didn't get to prepare, a transition plan, or here are the things I'm working on. Here's what, we were in the middle of union negotiations. We had wrapped up budget, but, end of the year things. And so really, and it's probably ego talking, right? Like I didn't get to leave on my terms. And that actually has really bothered me for a very long time. Maybe still even now, it's still a little fresh. But I think, so on the professional side of it, what I've taken away is that, one, you can only control what you can control, right? Which is how you respond to things. Two, I probably would have made all of the same decisions that I did by and large. I maybe would have approached them differently or would have communicated them differently. To Michael's point, if you're not willing to keep learning and growing as a person, we're probably not in the right profession. On the personal side of it, I'm so grateful for my family, my husband, who is she's like the most incredible human who puts up with my nonsense every day. They were so wonderful. Harrisburg was great too, because a fear that I had was, well, God, I haven't even started in this new community, and they're going to wonder, like, what happened? Why did they do this? Are we hiring someone that we don't want? And that has never been part of the equation here with the council. And we had an election shortly after I started, which made me a little nervous as well. But it's been such a great transition. And for me, I took myself out of the narratives that were being spun. I'm confident in the work that I do, and I did. Doesn't mean I don't have a lot to learn. Doesn't mean I didn't make mistakes. But I'm not going to let others whose sole goal is to tear me or others down define who I am. That's just, I can't do that. So yeah, I mean, it was very hurtful, but it also made it a clear exit, right? Because when I accepted the job, I was torn. We really enjoyed where we lived and had family there, and it's a good community. And, I think it was the universe's way of saying, well, you made the right decision.
Yeah, I really truly believe that, and maybe this sounds trite, everything happens for a reason. Being a kid from Buffalo and having the wondrous career I had, like none of it was anything I imagined. And in the worst moments, I think about, had I stayed, what would that have looked like? And it always got better. And I think the reason it gets better is because we have to process that failure. And it's not really necessarily, like in neither Mike's case or your case, that is a failure that you had any control over, but there are things that you can take from that moment of pain that become your strength. So Chris, I know you just did an entire episode on this subject,
Yes.
but I wanted to, touch base with you because, like me, you had that moment of, you got that perfect review. I had that at Bleacher Report. I'm like, our revenue's never been higher. Our audience has never been larger. And here's your pink slip. In that moment, how did that make you feel about the profession, about yourself? And what have you taken with you from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's an occupational hazard that we're all aware of when we step into the profession, and yet I think at some level we all think that's something that's never really going to happen to me, right? I mean, that's something that happens to other people. It's unfortunate, but I'm competent. I know how to have the right type of relationship with the council. That sort of thing's not really going to happen to me until it does, right? And I think one of the things. Looking back, that really hit home to me is that when you go through that sort of transition, you are going to be okay, right? And my biggest fear now is not losing my job, right? It is losing my reputation. I think that you can go through transition and come out the other side stronger. If you have done the job to the best of your ability, if you haven't done anything, illegal, if you've handled yourself professionally, I think people understand the nature of the profession, the volatility of the profession, the political side of the profession, right? That, any city manager is one election away from having to find another job. And I think people accept that. What's important is that you come out the other end of that with your reputation intact, and that so you can, find the next community that will embrace your leadership. When I went through this transition, it was just earlier this year. It was, March of this year. Yeah, a friend of mine who's been a city manager for a long time up in Northern California reached out to me, and he said something that was really profound for me. And he said, "Look, I've been through this several times in my career. The first time's always the hardest." He said, when it happened to me for the first time, I was trying everything I could to hold on, right? Desperate to try to stop the inevitable from happening. And when you're in that mentality, sometimes you do things that ordinarily you wouldn't do. You can't be effective leading from a place of fear, right? He said, but what I learned on the other side was, I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. And there is life and career after this transition. And he said, now, I don't lead with that fear anymore, because I know that if the time comes where I need to separate, whether it's from, initiated by the council or whether I realize I need to move on, it's going to be okay. And, I feel now, being on the other side of it, a level of peace that I have not experienced previously in the profession, that I feel that I need to do what I believe is the right thing for the community that I'm serving, for the city council that I'm serving. And at the end of the day, if it's not a right match, if it's not what the council's looking for, then that's okay, right? I mean, it's the council's prerogative to have whoever they want in that seat. But regardless, you have to be confident in your ability and in your leadership, and that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. And there is a community out there that will be a good fit.
100%. I want to talk really quickly because, each of you guys have gone through this moment. And I think that there's this feeling that, Amanda said it and you said it, Chris, and Mike, you said it, like, what will people think? What will the people in Harrisburg think about the situation that happened in Iowa? What are people going to think about me losing to a Green Party candidate? What my reputation, that as Chris so eloquently said, it reminds me of when we were in grade school and there was that file cabinet with the permanent record. I actually don't think it exists. I have been in the media business, and it's very you're like in management, in professional government management, you're walking the tightrope. I remember when I was at Bleacher Report, there was I got a call from our PR shop, and they said, they're doing an expose on management at Bleacher Report, and you're being named, and they're going to ask, the staff about things. And I managed 350 people. And I thought, oh my God, if one of these people says something to this article, this news reporter, if I've mismanaged one employee, my entire career could be over and my reputation could be ruined. I didn't sleep for 3 days during that process. Thank God the article came out. It was not directed at me, and it was, some unfavorable things were said, and I was embarrassed. But like I said, I got immediate traction. The article did not create the situation of Bleacher Report that led to me being let go. It was the whole C-suite. Like it was a moment of political opportunism from the executives there, or downsizing as they call it. And, but what's interesting is we all think that someone else is paying attention to the things that we are very sensitive about. But the reality is they have their own issues. The boards that will hire you going forward are thinking about, well, how did they manage the community? What were the results that they led to? What happened, right? Like when people interviewed me, it was about what you blew up Bleacher Report. We want to pay you a lot of money. And I'm like, yeah, I did that. Your work matters. That permanent filing cabinet of reputation, unless there's an arrest record and you do something really, really bad that is actually permanent, just take that moment to know. And the reason I wanted to have this conversation is these three incredible people have all gone through what you in the audience are probably feeling, that tension. Don't worry about it as much as you worry about the work, worry about what you're doing, do the right thing. Just do the right thing every day. All right. So question number 2, I call it board member blues. Now, Mike and I have both served as elected officials, but y'all have.
Me too.
And you too. All right. So Amanda, you're odd person out on this call. Sorry. You're probably the best one of the four of us. But, when you were telling your story about when you gave your notice, one of my dearest friends, the city manager of San Clemente, Andy Hall, did that to my council. He gave notice. And let me tell you, there were some of my members who shall remain nameless that were really pissed off and took it as an affront. And Andy called when he gave me the heads up and he said, look, your council's toxic. And I love you, Sam, but I can't do this anymore. And I've got a better offer. And I took it one way. Other board members took it the other way. Board members are a peculiar thing. So I wanted to start back with Mike, not naming names, and certainly none of you I'm going to ask to talk about your current board. We all think that our current boards are great because they are, and they're amazing, right? But a moment with a elected that sticks with you and something that you learned from that moment, something that you go, wow, that was shocking, painful, hard. And had I done it again, I might have done it differently, or maybe I did it the right way and I learned something really profound. So Mike, take it away. What have you learned from problematic board members?
Well, I got to say, I've really had some pretty good board members in Plainville. It's been really, really good. And I go back to a situation. I had 9 years in North Branford, and it wasn't really particularly a council member, board member. But the word you used, toxic, there was a toxic individual, okay, that was appointed multiple times a day, almost every day. It was just very toxic, and just trying to, turn and twist things when there really wasn't anything there. To the point, I'll tell you this, he called the FBI on my finance director over this purchasing program we had with the state. About the state of Connecticut allows the municipalities first right of refusal in terms of bidding on state surplus. And we used it like a gold mine and got so many different things. Well, he wanted an investigation. He called the FBI, and FBI calls my office, a field agent, to see if he could come in to interview. And I said, no, you're not coming here. Because to Chris's point, it's all about reputation. The minute he steps foot into town hall to say, hey, I'm special agent so-and-so, I'd like to speak to you to find this, I shut that down in a heartbeat and said, and those were the conversations with the council behind the scenes saying, listen, this is just so far out of bounds, right? Hank has just gone crazy, and you got to shut this down. So it just kept repeating. Unfortunately, there was a different mayor came in the next term, the same behavior. So for me, it was just it was just talking to them directly. They had made some things, shut him down a little bit, but he just wasn't the person that it just. You couldn't turn them off, right?
There's always one. There's always one. So many of the boards or cities and counties and towns and villages I've worked with, there's always one person where I get pulled aside and it's like, can you help me with fill in the blank. And I'm like, unfortunately, that's just, like in The Godfather Part 2, this is the business we've chosen. There's always going to be that one. Were you able to solve the Hank issue?
No. I mean, they thought they could rein him in, and my staff, it was just a complete waste of time and energy, right? And it was so for me, it was just, well, I'm just gonna grind it out as long as I can before a recruiter came, and it made me think this way, maybe this is my way. If I can't change them, then I've got to change. I've got to go, and that's what happened.
That's amazing. Amanda, how about you? Your war stories without naming names.
Boy, I'm not really sure how to answer this one. I have been really fortunate throughout most of my career to work with just really good people, right? Who maybe are a little misguided on a couple issues, or we personally don't agree on something, but that has never really bothered me. I've always thought that the elected officials I've worked with have had the best interest of their community in mind, which makes some of those challenges a little easier to tolerate. So I just keep trying to find the good in people and keep thinking about the bigger picture of what it is we're trying to accomplish. The community I'm in now, we're the fastest growing city in the state, and we have just incredible challenges in front of us. And if we all aren't on the same page on how to tackle that, then none of us are doing our job. None of us are doing what we're hired or elected for. And I just have to keep that at the forefront of what I'm doing.
Chris, tell me your story, your war story about what maybe it's one person, maybe it's a whole body, but what was that moment for you, and what did you learn?
Sam, I've been fortunate, really. I mean, I've worked with probably now 15, 16 city council members as my bosses in the three cities that I've managed over the last 7 years. And really, I believe every single one of them were in it for the right reasons. I think one of the challenging things about the profession is one of the things that you talk about a lot, actually, Sam, which is the difference between a private sector corporate board and a city council, which is, a board of a municipal corporation, right? And one of the big differences is that with cities, with municipal corporations, your board or your city council come to the job from all different walks of life, and very often with no experience in local government. And that can be incredibly challenging. I don't mind naming names. Probably the most challenging elected official I've come across was in my very first city, a guy by the name of Chris Mann. Chris Mann ran for city council at the age of 23 in the city of Westlake Village, California. And, it was almost an academic exercise. I wasn't supposed to win that race, but I did. Like a lot of candidates, like a lot of newly elected officials, I came into office hot off a campaign trail, having made promises, having ideas that, boy, once I get elected, I'm going to come in and I'm going to make change, right? I'm going to start barking orders and things are going to be different. And very quickly you realize, oh, wait a minute. There are 5 members of the city council, and in order to get anything done, I need at least 2 other votes. And wait a minute, here's all these staff over here and the city manager. What's the city manager's role here? And what's the correct relationship? And what am I supposed to be doing versus what this person is supposed to be doing? And there is a very steep learning curve when you do not have a background in local government, and all of a sudden you're a decision maker. You're one of 5 members of this board with tremendous responsibility. And I think some people do a better job with that transition and being open to that learning curve than others. Some people just really never give up the mindset of, I'm going to dictate things as an elected official, and that becomes incredibly challenging. I think we need to do a better job of educating the public on the process and how it's supposed to work. I think we need to do a better job of training candidates. I'm a big fan of putting on a candidate briefing, during election season. We bring all the candidates in and we do a little training on how the city works. Every department presents, and we do, I touch a lot on the council manager form of government and what the appropriate roles are of staff versus council. And sometimes that sticks more than other times. But this whole system we have is challenging. It's the best thing out there. I haven't seen anything better, but you almost set yourself up for failure when you bring people in that have no idea how the system's supposed to work, and you just expect them to act the way that the system is set up ideally to work, and it's it's a learning curve.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, elected officials, not perfect people. I certainly was one. I think now, at the time, I thought of myself as a really good council member. Now, doing the work that I do and meeting folks like all of you, I'm like, oh, I was guilty of so much of this. I was definitely the guy who was texting at like 1 a.m, not for like a reaction, but just kind of like, I need your take on this. I never respected the boundary because I am a workaholic and I'm a live to work kind of person. So I always love work and assume everybody else does. And so I never really, as a newly elected board member, I was like, yeah, people are, I'm on the board. I can do, and by the way, it happens in the private sector. So board members are challenging, and I'm going to pivot us now away from sort of the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. And we're going to use the board member as sort of a transition. I got a message on LinkedIn or a comment on LinkedIn, because I always talk about how Facebook is aging out, right? Like we put so much attention on these Facebook community groups and what comments we see on Facebook, et cetera. And a county administrator in rural Georgia wrote that they just had a change in their board. And 2 people in their early 30s are now joining the council, and they communicate very differently. And they use TikTok and Instagram and sort of the modern platforms. And that got me to thinking about how we embrace change in local government as it relates to our staff. I've had the pleasure of meeting members of all of your staffs. Before I did my work at CiviSocial, I worked in social media. And so I worked with creators, or as also known as influencers, that had millions or tens of millions of followers who were teenagers. And they were unfiltered and shared their opinions with me. Even though I was in a leadership role, I had to listen to them because they were where the audience was. I had to take their perspective and try to manage them, and guide them and mentor them, but also realize that they had a lot of value to offer. And so each of you guys have members of staff who are young and extremely talented. I'm going to pitch this one to Amanda first. Thinking about your young staff, because the staff in Harrisburg, average age, I'm guessing millennial, right? Just like your community is average age of like 31. What are the learnings that you have in managing people that come from a different perspective, that are younger, that are sort of like, a little more plucky, as my middle-aged self using old-timey phrases, right? They just come at it differently. How do we harness that enthusiasm, but also contain it in a way?
Well, that's a really great question. Yeah. So my organization, not only are we relatively young demographically, 75% of my staff have been with the city for less than 5 years. So we're very young from an experience perspective, and a majority of them have never worked in any other community. They've come from other sort of private sector backgrounds. So we're just kind of all learning as we go. I try to remember that for a very long time in my career, I was the youngest person in the room. And I don't want people to feel the way that I did when I was in those rooms, that I didn't know anything. My voice didn't matter, even though I was supposed to be leading those groups, right? So I try to give a lot of leeway, set some clear boundaries. If you're going to be posting out on Instagram or TikTok, let's use some professional judgment. They're good at showing me what they're coming up with, and I have ultimate veto power. I don't think I've vetoed anything to this point. But I also, I don't live in that world. I don't have Facebook. I have Instagram. I have TikTok. I don't really do anything with them. So, but I also know that that's where we need to be. And I can't be the one doing it because it will not be authentic. If I'm out there trying to, do some weird dance, it'll it'll be a mess for everyone. So let them live where they find joy and fulfillment. I spend a lot of time, not just with my own organization, but with other organizations, talking about your geniuses and where you find your value and where you find your joy and fulfillment. And if I, as the leader, can give them opportunities to do work that balances out sometimes that work that is not fun, that is draining, I think that one makes them more well-rounded employees and makes our organization a desirable place.
I love that. I think we have to, I really think I've learned more from young people, from keeping close to young people and keeping my mind open to how they see the world. It is so much a part of my own career relevance, because I was always, I guess I was probably more afraid of becoming irrelevant. Like, the people have FOMO, fear of missing out. I have fear of, missing everything. Like, I'm terrified of losing my, finger on the pulse, because in the media business, if you're not speaking to young people, you might as well not be there. And so it was ingrained in me. And while managing young people is a challenge, because, we all look at it and go, well, when I was your age, I could tell you. But I think what you said, Amanda, is really spot on. Like, we've all been that person. How can we communicate to our past selves in a way that we would actually have listened and learned the things that we had to learn, probably by touching the stove and burning it? So I love that. And all of you guys, when I see your staffs doing social media stuff, it just brings such joy to my heart, because it's I know these kids in many cases, and I'm like, they're so good, and they're learning as they go, and so fascinating to see that. Mike, you've got a young team. You've got a young ACM who's kind of like the yin to your yang. Your social media person is very young, extremely talented. Tell me how you've embraced the difference between millennials and Gen Zs in your workforce, because Plainville does have I think when I was there, the lady at the senior center had been there for many, many, many years. So you've got kind of unlike Amanda, you've got a little bit of a different mix of folks.
Yes. Sean Cohen, our senior center, 50 years. She was the first hire, the only one they've had. And so, but to talk about the younger staff and social media has been just a lot of fun for me, an eye-opening experience. And I just want to maybe echo something that Amanda said about, I think giving opportunity, right? So I think back to when I started my career in Wyndham. I was a young 28-year-old and just ready to set the world on fire. And the first selectman at the time took me under his wing and really gave me, sort of set the stage and gave me a lot of latitude. So I carried that with me. And of course, 20 plus years later, I had that chance with my assistant, Andy, to, 27, 28 years old and when I hired him, and just, giving him the opportunity to speak freely, to learn, to fail, and to figure out his way through it. Poor guy. In that process, we had a case with the union, and we went through it, and he got deposed. It was the first time he got deposed, and I said, well, not a fun thing to go through, but he was so on point. It was just like, that is now. I told him, now you've got that behind you. And and if you think that was bad, now it's behind you. There's nothing you can't do. Right. And so and again, he kind of pushed me through the learning social media. I had no idea. Right. I had an account. I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing. But, a young team, all in their 20s, showing the old guard, what it's all about. And their spirit is just contagious. Right. And that's what I love about it, in terms of just their ideas and how they communicate and what, really resonates with the community, because we should be touching all aspects of our community, not just the seniors and middle-aged folks that are going out to vote and so forth. So I'm just trying to keep an open mind and practice giving opportunity. And I think hopefully we can talk a little bit about the opportunity moving forward to bring more young people into the career of local government, which I think is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. Let's segue into that in 1 second. One of the things as I turn it up to Chris for a second on the same topic, one of the things that I've noticed, I mentioned themes, right? The theme of fear, the theme of the elected official turnover, that idea of reputational damage. All of these fears exist in all of the places that I've traveled. But I think there's something unique about people who have worked with me. All of you guys share this. Your teams are empowered. It does not mean you're easy leaders to work with, right? You're not softies, not a one of you. I remember, Chris, when I first met you in person, and you were working with Mr. Parman, who's now a council member who was on a previous episode. Your interaction was so fascinating. You really trusted him as a young man on your team. When I see you with Corey in Wildomar, and Wildomar is so unique, and I want you to just talk about that team, because it's such a young city. I mean, it's kind of just figuring itself out in a way that a Plainville, for example, has a 50-year track record just with a senior center, but you've only been a city since 2008, I believe, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
It's an incredible thing to have a group of young people kind of stumble their way, but thoughtfully, and for you to have that trust as a leader. The thing I would say that's really unique about the folks I've had the privilege of working with, and I think it's leaders who are willing to say, we need to communicate differently. We need to think about things differently. It's that same essence that we have trust in our teams. I've talked to folks in places that I haven't had the privilege of working. I'll make a pitch and I'll be like, I'm never going to work with them because it's very hierarchical. It's the manager's only talking to the department heads. They will never speak to a person down the line. For me, in my career, I had the privilege of taking a young lady who was a coordinator. She was a senior vice president in a year because of her talent and nothing else. Like, when we listen to people in all of these, you're all in smaller communities. You're not in Los Angeles or in a wealthy, places where tax dollars are aplenty and you can do whatever you want. You have the resources you have. It's like football, right? Whether it's the Cowboys or the Bills, you got to use the assets that you have to win the game. And sometimes that's a rookie, and sometimes that's a veteran, and sometimes it's in between. I think too often in local government, people get like, I'm just going to talk to my department heads. And so, Chris, talk a little bit about Wildomar, your experience, your philosophy around.
Well, yeah, Sam, the Bills do rely on Josh Allen a little bit too much.
No kidding.
That's a good point. Good point. Listen, are there differences in the different generations and the younger group coming up? Yes, there are. But really, I believe the things that appeal to the younger employees, the same things that the older employees are looking for, right? I mean, look, I'm a big believer in intent-based leadership, in empowerment. I believe that the best place for a decision to be made is usually closest to where the information lives, right? And so that means empowering people throughout the organization at every level, to have ownership of their job and to come up with creative ideas. Micromanagement is never well received within an organization, and so those are the things. I will say, I am not a fan. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, oh gosh, we have more millennials coming, so we have to change the way we're doing business to cater to them, because otherwise no one's going to want to work here. I've never looked at it that way. I think there are good things and bad things about what, kind of the stereotypical millennial mentality, or even younger than millennial, right? I've seen young people come up that have tremendous creativity, and giving them an opportunity to use that, to tap into that, it can have huge benefits for the organization. I've also seen a lot of younger people coming up who have a tremendous sense of entitlement. And I think sometimes we are tempted to try to find ways to change our policies and the way we do business to cater to the kind of those senses of entitlement. I want to be able to work from home, right? That's a big one. And look, I'm not a believer that we need to shape the organization around the employee mindset. I'm looking for people who are going to be rock stars and look to achieve excellence across the board at every level in the organization. And I think if you empower people, if you give them an outlet for creativity, an opportunity to have ownership over their job function, professional development opportunities, trainings, if they feel that they're going to have an opportunity to move up in their career within that organization, then they're going to be motivated and do a good job for the organization, just like your older employees. I think another thing we need to think about is that our elected officials are getting younger as well, and they have different expectations that we do have to adjust and meet. And in my experience, a lot of those expectations have had to do with communications. And so I think first thing everyone needs to do is go hire CiviSocial. That's the first thing. That's
Thank you.
But, I came into an organization where, the communications approach was antiquated and, heavy reliance on press releases and Facebook, right? No TikTok, very little Instagram. And what Instagram was, it was just kind of reposting from Facebook. And, we weren't reaching, a lot of our residents that way. And, some of the younger staff members have been very excited about implementing CiviSocial's approach and have brought tremendous creativity to our communications in the past few months, and so that's exciting. But I'm excited. I sense a lot of excitement with younger generation. I hear a lot of doom and gloom about oh gosh, we're doomed because this younger generation. I said no, I see a lot of positive there. I really do.
I last spring, so last January, started teaching public administration at South Dakota State University. So mainly sophomores and juniors in my class, and those kids are incredible. To Chris's point, I cannot wait to see what they do, and I would hire any one of them. They are creative, they are thoughtful. Where their heart lies is truly a call to service. They are deeply committed to the things that they believe in, which is no different than me or Chris or Michael or you, Sam. And so I have zero concerns about this generation as a whole. And man, what a privilege it was. I learned from them every single week we were together.
That is awesome. And look, I too have a lot of faith. I've watched the media industry change from television and film to social media, and in between there was streaming. I've watched the disruption happen, and I've watched generational change in my industry. I look at especially Gen Z, the people that are just coming into the workforce right now, as the most entrepreneurial, the most creatively problem solving, and also mission driven. And to me, to your point, Amanda, to I think everybody's shared belief, I think this group is going to give us the way forward. I think for a lot of managers, the fear of things like artificial intelligence, things like social media, things like, challenging the way we've done things. And the sort of thesis of this episode is like, what are we afraid of and how do we move forward? And the reason I wanted to get you guys together is because, Mike is on the East Coast, Amanda, you're smack dab in the middle, and Chris is right near the Pacific Ocean. But you're all doing something remarkable. You're using talented teams, inspiring and mentoring people, not being afraid, not just of communications, but to let people within your organizations lead and to grow. And I think that takes within you as leaders something special. So I want to go back to close us out. on Mike's question, like, how do we inspire this next generation of leaders? How do we get these millennials who have that spirit of service, but also, most importantly, are going to challenge us as middle-aged people in, that are talented but need their wisdom, need their guidance? How can we invite them in, and how can we leverage this as an opportunity? So, Mike, I'm going to turn to you, and then Chris, and we'll close that question on Amanda.
Yeah, great question, Sam. I think unquestionably it is the fact that social media allows us to be unfiltered now. Right. So we've got to lead with transparency and trust and build trust. And I think I think it's the great resource that we have at our fingertips to use effectively to tell the story, right, of public service and about serving your community and a higher level of just, doing something meaningful. And so that's I love to say that, when we do posts, we're either, educational and informative and sometimes maybe even entertaining. But again, it's just building the trust factor within the community at the younger age, just allowing them to come in and understand what it is that we do for the community on a daily basis, and that there's something across the board. Pick a topic. If you want to be a finance person, you can be in the finance of, you want to be a clerk, you want to be a tax collector, assessor, you want to be an engineer, superintendent of roadways and public works. It's just so many different career paths that could take you into public service. It's not just, that bean counters or whatever. I don't know whatever perception they have of local government. I think we're changing that perception through social media. But there's no more filter. There's no more. We have to go through the local newspapers anymore to wait for a story or, some type of PR statement to put out and everything. So I see it as a great tool, great opportunity, and we keep just having this conversation on a local level.
And Mike, I wanted to say this. You give such a wonderful permission structure. Before we had ever met each other, right? I'm seeing Mike Paulhus jumping out of leaves. I'm seeing Mike Paulhus in his full suit jumping in the swimming pool. Tell me just real quickly, like, the courage that you have to be the face, because not all managers want to be the face. Certainly the professional organization that many of you belong to discourages this. And I think this is another thing that really needs to change. We need to modernize, and we need to have new voices that are challenging previous assumptions. You have just, you stormed the blockade, and you said in the earlier part of this conversation, you were uncomfortable with communications. In fact, it was something that you saw as a personal failure. How did you find that courage?
Well, I just felt like it was I'm a lifelong learner, or at least I like to think of myself as a lifelong learner. And I said, I stepped back and I said to myself, well, wait a minute, this is just another skill set to learn. What am I afraid of, right? And I've got a great team around me. And I just said to myself, you know what? There's not going to be any stupid question. I'm going to say, how do I open an Instagram account? What does a reel mean? What is all of these stupid questions, that just, once you go through that process, then you just, again, I felt like I was going to jump in with both feet. And that's what I did early on when they said, hey, Mike, what about, you just jumping in the pool? And I was like, okay, let's do it, And so it's not for everybody, and I understand that. We do a larger thanks to you, Sam, and allowing us to go beyond a small group of social media team to creator squad that we have, and anyone who's comfortable to being in front of a camera, we encourage that. But if they're not, that's okay too. They can participate and contribute in other ways in terms of coming up with ideas and or scripts or things like that, or just they want to tell about a specific program that they're working on, and which is great. So it was just I like learning, I like trying new things, and it's just a great way to build new skill sets.
Well, I think you are you're your magazine cover is not your best work. People should follow the town of Plainville and check out Mike on a weekly basis, because he puts himself out there, and it is remarkable. And I do think one of the ways to get young people to follow is to see leaders who are fearless in that regard. So I give you tremendous props for doing that. How about you, Amanda? How are we going to bring those folks that you're teaching in South Dakota, how are we going to get them into local government and keep them in local government? Because we know that the pay isn't, and the reward on the financial side isn't what it is in the private sector. But I want to grab those folks and put them in places. How do we do that?
I think we start by, like Michael said, telling the story. I mean, I was 10 years into my professional career before I even knew what city management was. I fell into this. Someone said, "Hey, we're hiring a city administrator, and I feel like this would be a good fit for you." I don't even know what that is or what they do. And had I known when I was a student, when I was in college, it probably would have been a path I would have followed more traditionally. So I think that's part of it. When we talk about a new generation coming in, obviously we're talking about the younger generation, but I don't think we should forget those that are maybe looking for their second career, who, like you, Sam, hey, I've done this my whole life and I'm ready to do something different, and I want to give back. I take every opportunity that I can to just talk about the work that we do as managers. We got to be involved in our professional organizations so that across our communities, across our states, people at least know who we are and what we do. South Dakota is pretty limited in the number of, there's only 5 true council manager forms of government in the state. There are others that are like my position now, that's an appointed administrator. And so there's just a lack of knowledge in general about the profession and what it does. But also, to Michael's point, I'm concerned about the next group of city managers coming in, but also where are we going to find finance officers? And try hiring an engineer right now. It is stupid. And it is incredibly difficult to hire for these very professional positions. But there's so much value in the work that we do beyond our paychecks. And I do believe that the people who are the right kind of people to serve in these roles understand that. And it's a good balance for them.
Yeah, I love the fact that you said, like, people coming out of their primary career. My friend, unfortunately, was a part of the layoffs that happened in the federal government recently, and now he's working in the Albuquerque area for a local school district, and really embracing opportunities to continue public service from his time in the federal government. Now he's working in local government. My story, I desperately wanted to do something that was meaningful to me. And when I looked back at my life, the only thing that I thought I ever really did that had true meaning, where there was legacy, where I could look back at the city that I served in and see tangible progress, was my time in local government. So the problem for me was, what the heck does a media person in government, what do you do with that? I obviously figured something out, which is great, but these skills are so necessary. The talent is necessary. And it really, to me, it's about that. It's about the story. If people see themselves in your seats, if people aspire to be the next Mike, the next Amanda, the next Chris, or that next engineer, if we tell the story of what that is, that's what's going to draw a young person into the field. If we're posting flyers and saying, here's our, job posting and our benefits, that's not the language that young people speak. And quite frankly, it's hard to get people of talent to think about this stuff. But I want young people to know that this profession is so much bigger than anything you could imagine it to be. And so and I think you guys are all doing an incredible thing. Chris, as the actual host of Gov360, I'm going to let you kind of close out on this question.
Yeah, I think telling our story is important. And man, I've got nothing on Mike when it comes to being fearless on social media. I love what you're doing, Mike. I think it's great. I don't think I would jump into cold water myself. I think what you're doing has impact, and I think young people will see that and say, "Wow, this can be fun."
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, to me, Sam, the biggest thing that I see that really brings people into local government, that gets people, maybe not even bring people into local government, but the people who are in local government, that gets them excited and gets them wanting to stick with it and wanting to promote and wanting to maybe be a city manager someday, is having big, bold goals, right? Doing big things. Most people aren't happy coming to work and just shuffling paper every day, right? Okay, so I'm gonna be a planner. I'm gonna process this application. Okay, well, yeah, that's part of the job, but what are we doing, right? What is it we're accomplishing for the community? Is there a big, bold vision that we're striving towards, and then watching that become a reality? Now that's intoxicating. That's exciting, right? And so I think it's so important. I talk a lot about governing boldly, leading boldly, and there are a lot of things that really means. But one of the biggest things is have big ideas. Right. Be going somewhere grand, right? Have a vision. Make sure everyone within the organization understands and buys into that vision. And then people are more excited to come to work every day because we're, as a team, working towards that. We're doing something big for the community. I'm not just processing this application, right? There's more meaning to it. I think that is, to me, what makes local government exciting. Our ability to have real, tangible impact in the communities that we serve, positive impact on people's lives. Not a lot of professions have that, really, right? And so if we can get people excited about that aspect of the profession, and I've seen it, we're building or working towards something, people get excited. They want to come to work. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. And as I took a moment to reflect and to go back and to look at some of the storytelling that all of the 20 clients that I've worked with this last year and a half, it blew me away. It actually brought me to tears. I've literally screen recorded probably 100 videos that I'm going to begin sharing on my Instagram account of your work. It's wild to think that this is just organizations proud of their story, excited to tell them and share them. And they're all different. They all have a different flavor, a different feeling. What Amanda's team in Harrisburg is doing, what Chris's team in Wildomar, what Mike's team in Plainville, you're not it's not, you didn't get the Canva template and you're all following along, with take out the trash on Tuesday. You each have a personality and a flavor to the way that you communicate and express yourselves. And that will evolve over time. But to me, that's that magnetism that I think Chris is talking about, right? Like when people see themselves in the work, they get excited to be a part of the work. And when they see fearless leaders who have gone through some of the challenges that you guys were kind enough to share with me, they see that government is not just, packaged press release. It's real people that are challenging, that are being challenged, but also overcoming that. And in this profession, we need as much of that positivity and hope as we can get. So you guys have really given me a shot in the arm. Chris, I'm going to, as I promised, last word is yours because this is your show. I am honored. I'd love it if you'd ask the question you're dying to ask to Amanda and Mike to close us out. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to grab the microphone. I hope I didn't do Gov360 anything other than be the proudness that it deserves.
Sam, you did an amazing job hosting Gov360. In fact, if you'd like to do it full time, that would be great. So I don't have to do it anymore.
This is the hardest thing. Oh my gosh, being a podcast host, this is the first time I've done it. Hats off, man. I have infinite respect. It is a tough gig.
I love it. It's almost therapy for me, being able to connect with other people in the profession. I despite all of its challenges, I love the profession. I can't think of anything I'd rather do, really. I'm just passionate about it. And so to be able to talk about it, to be able to connect with others in the profession, I mean, it's been so meaningful to me and so fulfilling, not just recording the shows, but really what comes after that, which is everyone who reaches out and having a conversation about issues that we're all struggling with. That to me is what's most meaningful. And in terms of questions for Amanda and Mike, I feel like I know both of you so well because I follow you on social media, and you both do such a great job on social media. I don't really have any in particular questions to ask, but I will say to those who are watching and listening, if you'd like to get in touch with Sam, Amanda, or Mike, I will put the links to their LinkedIn pages in the show notes. I encourage you to follow them because each of these three people do an incredible job on social media. They put out some really good content, much of it amusing, but also very meaningful to me and for anyone in the profession. We'll put a link also to CiviSocial and to Sam's new book, The Social Media Playbook for Local Elected Officials, which would make a fantastic Christmas gift for all of the elected officials in your life. I know what my city council members are getting for Christmas. I'll tell you that. Before we go, let me ask one quick favor. Please subscribe to Gov360 on YouTube and share this episode with your friends and colleagues. Also, subscribe to the Gov360 newsletter on LinkedIn. It's free, and LinkedIn is a great way for us to connect and to continue the conversation. That's a wrap for today. Thank you for joining us on Gov360. Until next time, govern boldly, my friends.